Good morning from Simply Media and Deaver Brown, the publisher. Today, we're bringing you one of our PMI ideas, the plus, the minus, the interesting points about looking at a man that dominates our current culture, Donald Trump. Love him, hate him, or don't care about him, it's important to understand who this figure is that seems larger in life. And the left media, who don't like him, can't help talking about him. And that's interesting because that's the other side of him. So even the people who don't like him and criticize him can't help themselves from talking about him. And I find that a very interesting point in the PMI thing. Now, the thing to understand about somebody is to listen to what they say, not what's said about them. Too much of what we learn is not in original sources. Well, he tweets all the time, so you can know what he's saying. And here are a few things that I think people mistake about him. And this isn't for him or against him, it's just about him. When he was running, and I first came across him in 2015, what was interesting is that he was talking about himself as doing for the country what he thought was right, and he was constantly attacked by other Republicans because he was not a true conservative. Well, he's not a true conservative. He's not an ideologue. He goes his own way. Now, there are good points of that and bad points of that, and people have talked about it. But he was the only one that said, I'm not that. He'd been a Democrat before Reagan. And then when Reagan came along, the optimist Morning in America, he switched, like many people did. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong, but that's what he did. Now, there's another man who is important in our life that did the same thing. That was Ronald Reagan. He started out as a Union Democrat and shifted as he thought the times did. The important thing about that is they had a foot in both camps. And I think that's what's important. Doesn't make him right, doesn't make him wrong, but it's important to understand that. What he said in September 2016 to me is telling. He said, you may not like me, but you'll like my policies. That was an interesting point because it appealed to a lot of the people who eventually voted for him. I mean, Trump is kind of a wild man. He's a New Yorker, and a lot of Americans have never liked New Yorkers, and for good and bad reasons. And he's a kind of roller derby guy that gets down in the dirt and does all that stuff. But interestingly, he said, look at my policies. And his policies led to, and this is what you should consider, tax cuts. Well, the tax cuts did something very interesting that brought back companies that had gone offshore to avoid corporate taxes in America, which were the highest in the 20 important countries economically in the world, to be average. So they came back. The money came back. The corporate jobs, which are key, came back. So that was good if you like business. Now, the part that when Obama was dealing with high taxes, he used to say, well, it may not get us more money, but it's the right thing to do. Trump saw it differently. He saw that, well, we need to have those people here, and we need to have the money here. Well, the problem with the money here and the people here and the companies here is that means the power is here, and the power is on the business side. And there are a lot of people that are very concerned about it. And if you listen to what's going on in the Democratic Party now, they're talking about that at great length. They have too much power. Do they? Maybe they do. They certainly have it, and they're getting more powerful all the time as they make a lot of money. So that's an interesting question. And if you like history, go back to 1865 to 1900. That was the time that was called the Gilded Age. Much criticism because it wasn't a political time as much as a business time. That was the time that America catapulted to become the most powerful economic country in the world, something it has never relented. The presidents tended to be not well known. Rutherford, Hayes, Garfield. Most people don't know who these people are. Grover Cleveland, a Democrat. Well, the point is, the politicians weren't core. In the 20th century, a lot of them came along and were Democrats, and they were important. Wilson, Roosevelt, Kennedy, and, of course, Obama. So what's different about this is almost like Michael Fox going back to the future. Now business is more important. And as in the Gilded Age, there is a criticism of it, a tinniness, not real gold, all this stuff. So think about that. And if you want to know more about it, take a look at the Gilded Age, what went on. And it was an interesting time and one worth looking at. The other thing about Trump is there was all this talk how he was Hitler and a megalomaniac. Well, now, what's most interesting is he takes after the American isolationists that were dragged into World War I and dragged into World War II against their wishes. I mean, for better or worse. No, he's retreating from the world. He's backed off. He's moved away. And like the isolationists, he looks out for America first. They did too. Vandenberg is a great example if you want to look him up, from Michigan. What is he doing? He's saying, we are Americans and we're allowed to look out for ourselves. Now, if you are a world person, a futurist in that kind of way, he's the wrong guy. You're supposed to look out for the rest of the world. But it's important to understand that's what he's doing, and it has strong historical roots. From Thomas Jefferson, who was always looking to have fewer rules, less taxes. And people don't talk often about the fact that as president, he blocked the Louisiana Purchase for a lot of money for then, but the federal deficit went down by 1/3. Well, somebody can say it wasn't a lot, but yes, it's like the old story about bread in the 20s. Well, it was only 10 cents, but people didn't have 10 cents. Well, it's the same kind of thing. We owed a lot of money, and he cut it back. And that was because he was a libertarian, much like Trump in that regard, though very different in other ways, of course. And it's important to think about these things. Don't decide, but keep your mind on what he is, not just what's said about him, as he retreats and stands up for the country, perhaps more than he should, because many in the Democratic Party think we should be world people, and maybe they're right. I mean, Wilson did that, Roosevelt did that, and there's nothing wrong with that point of view other than it is a point of view. And if that's true, think about the other side. Perhaps it's not wrong for us to look out for ourselves. So anyway, think about it, and I think it's worth looking into in what's really going on. And one of the things that's classic in American life is when people of extreme views come along, well, the mainstream often adapts them. Bernie Sanders came out for $15 an hour, and Jeff Bezos, the genius that he is, said, you know, that's not a bad idea. So Costco, Walmart, Target, and many others are trying to reach that or have reached it as an idea without legislation. The influence of that idea is as important as any law that could be written. Anyway, think about it. It's wonderful to keep an open mind about this. Don't take sides. Think about it, then take your side, and then decide what you believe. But examine all sides, whether it's Bernie Sanders, the Democratic Socialist, or it is Biden, who's kind of an in-betweener, or it's Trump himself. Thank you from Simply Media. I enjoyed this because I take no sides in this. I just think it's important for us to consider them all, and we try to do that. And if you like our stuff, sign up for a subscription, and if you like it more, buy some of our titles. And if you don't want to buy them, don't buy them. Just enjoy our channel. Thank you again.